In this section, we'll cover getting a variable out of a URL itself, as well as using headers to pass information. So this is all well and good for a parameterized URL, but what about a URL where we have a variable that's in the path itself? It's a very common thing that you see. For example, here's one of my repositories with a public project in it. We look at the URL, you can see that it has my username here, and it also has the name of the repository here. How can we make this happen? Fortunately, Go can help us out with this too. For this one, let's say it's responses, and then we'll have a variable inside the URL itself. We'll call it user. And we'll say that you need to hit the hello endpoint with this. For this, let's create a new function called handle user responses hello. And let's go ahead and scaffold that in like we did before. Once again, we'll use a placeholder error. Now we can go ahead and write our test. For this, we'll also need a request. It'll still be a get. And we'll use testman again. And it's still got a no body. There's a little bit of a gotcha here. Remember how we discussed that we're not testing the server routing and machinery, but we're just testing the handle funcs? Because this mux is responsible for extracting from this match what the path values were, if we were to send this, it wouldn't get them. So what we need to do for this is to just fake it. This does mean that the target here is almost more documentation than anything else, but that's fine. Again, this would be something that you'd want to test with a end-to-end black box integration test. Once again, we need a recorder, and we're going to call our function. Once again, we pass it W and the request we just built. Lastly, we're going to do the same validation we normally do. First off, the desired status code. Not forgetting our body. And let's say that we want the same output from this. You'll probably notice that our tests are getting a little bit repetitive. I personally don't mind if my tests are somewhat repetitive. It's about the functionality that they give me. Now we need to implement this. This is going to look very similar to this. The difference is going to be in how we parse our parameters out. For a path value, we can call path value on the request. And again, we're looking for user. Once we have the username, we're going to build the response in the same way. I know this is a little bit repetitive. We'll get to that soon. Now let's run our test. And everything's passing. Let's start our server and test it manually. We'll pull up our API testing tool and fire off a request. And we can see that we get the response we expect. You'll note, if we take this out, it's not really a valid URL anymore. But we do end up getting our homepage response here. And that's the same if we take out that extraneous slash. Everything is going to redirect, but that's not really the correct behavior for an API. If there's no match, we should probably see a 404 error here. What's happening is that the server mux is not finding a match here, or here, or here, and so it's falling back to the root. If we don't want that behavior, we can make a really simple change. If we append this, a dollar sign and curly braces, to the root, and we restart our server, you can see now 404 page not found. This essentially says match the root and nothing else. So there we have two different ways to put information in our URL, both as parameters and as values. But using these isn't necessarily recommended, and you got to decide based on what your API is doing and how sensitive it is. The main concern here is that these pieces of information aren't in any way protected. They can show up in logs, they can show up in browser histories, they can show up all over the place, right? A username is probably not the worst thing in the world to have in there, but there could be problems with that depending on what your API does. What you can do instead is you can put the information in the header. For us, this won't really do anything because we're not using TLS. But if we were, then the header information would be encrypted. This is really good for login credentials and stuff like that. Let's go ahead and set up an endpoint that'll handle that as well. Let's go ahead and make a new endpoint. And we'll use user hello as our path. And we'll call it handle hello header. Let's tidy up our workspace again. Stop the server and get this out of here. And we'll need a request still. We'll create our temporary error. And we'll write our test first. Once again, we'll need to create a request. And the body is still nil. Much like before with the URL parameters, we need to set the headers, which is just as easy as calling request.header.set. We'll call it the user key still, and we'll say that our user is testman. Now we need a recorder, and we call our function. Now we're going to verify that the response code and body are the same, and we can actually probably just borrow this code from an earlier test. We do need to be careful because we put a space in our value here, that we add an expected space. Let's run our test. And you can see it fails, as we expected. We got not implemented. Let's fix that typo. Let's go ahead and write the function. In order to get our username out of the headers, we just need to call request header.get. And we're going to use the key string of user, which is what we used over here. Now, we're going to build the response in the same way we have up here. And we're going to return it. Let's go ahead and run our test again. And everything's passing. But what if for some reason we didn't have a header? We can just comment this out and test that theory. And you can see that we would get a hello again, much like we did with the parameterized URL. So we need to handle the case where this is blank. Let's go ahead and add a test to do that. This test will look a lot like this one. So we can copy this. And we'll say no header. We'll handle just the case where a header wasn't included. For this, because we're kind of pretending this is a more secure endpoint, let's say that we're going to return a bad request for this. We expect to see status bad request, but we won't see this body. Let's say that we want to see an error message that says invalid username provided. Now let's run our tests again. Because we put our handle hello header test back, it's passing again, but this one fails, as we expect. If we look at the details, bad return, we got this instead of the invalid username provided. Let's go ahead and fix that. If we look at get, It says that it gets the first value associated with the given key. If there are no values associated with the key, get returns an empty string. So we can check that very easily. If username is an empty string, then we can return an error. Right here, let's go ahead and run the test. We're still going to fail, and you'll see why in a minute. As you can see, we got an invalid return. It still returned hello, but we expected invalid username provided. This is because we forgot to type return here. You must be careful of this, and this is why I like to test the body as well. If we run this, then we can see that everything's passing. As a note here, because we're only checking for a username in this endpoint, this error message probably makes sense, but you should consider this for your own API. If there was a password, then returning a bad username or a bad password message specifically on those cases could give a malicious actor more information about your system than you might want. For this, you might consider saying invalid username or password provided for both cases. Let's go ahead and run our server again. And let's pull up our API testing tool. And we'll set it to use the new endpoint. If we send this, we see our invalid username provided and our bad request status. In here, we have the ability to add headers. We get our expected response back. Everything appears to be working. Some of you may have noticed that we're repeating this code block a lot. Let's go ahead and fix that now. While we were building the API out, it was okay to copy paste this. But if we wanted to make changes in the future, we would have to go change it in each one. Instead, let's pull out a function. This function will take the argument of a response writer and a string. That string will be the username, and it will write this response to the response writer for us. As a challenge, go ahead and implement that now. Remember that all of the tests should be passing when you're done with this. Go ahead and pause the video and give it a try. Alright, hopefully that wasn't too hard for you. Let's go ahead and do this together. I'm going to call it handle hello. I'm going to take a response writer and the username. I'm going to copy and paste this in. We'll still log the error if it happens, but again, it shouldn't. Now, we replace this with a call to handle hello. We do the same here. And here. Handle goodbye will be different, so we won't change that. And let's run the tests. Our testing has paid off. We've changed the internals of the system, but our behavior remained the same, and we have a reasonable degree of certainty that we haven't broken anything. Now if we wanted to make any changes to the entire API, we could do it in one place. For instance, we could take out the exclamation point. Or we could change the log message. If we were to do this though, it would break all of our tests. This is to be expected. We've changed the output. Let's put that back. And we're back to green. And that'll wrap up this section. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope you learned something. If you'd like to support me and help me to create more content like this, check the video description below for ways in which you can do that. You can also just share this video with your friends, and that'll help a lot too. Thank you very much again, and we'll see you in the next one.